Acts chapter 4, a Levite from Cypress. Now, really, this man, we first are introduced to in Acts chapter 4. If you want to turn there, I'm going to be kind of doing a little bit of a saunter through Acts here and highlighting a few different chapters. But if you look at Acts chapter 4, and we're still on the avocado. How many? There we go. 4:30. Now we're introduced in chapter 4 to a man who we know as Barnabas in 4:36. So I'll just look at that. 4:36. I know you might have it on your phone so you can get there a little quicker. Those old school people going analog actually using it on the pages, but either way works. Now Joseph, a Levite from Cypress, whom the apostle called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, sold the field he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. That's the first time we're introduced to this man called Barnabas. I don't know what his nickname was, Barnabas. His real name was Joseph. Now, I don't know if they called him Barney. I don't know what they called him really, but it was kind of, hey, here's Barney. And what that meant, everybody knew, that meant son of encouragement. And we see here his first encouraging thing is he's selling some land and he's putting it at the apostles' feet. Now what happens in the next verse in chapter 5? Remember the story, put this in context. There's another couple that comes, right? Another couple that comes, and they also sold a piece of land. We know them as Ananias and Sapphira. Now a real embarrassing moment. Was it last year? I think last year. We're doing a marriage seminar in DR. And so I have this whole thing where I introduced Doug and Rebecca as, I'm going to do it again, as Aquila and Priscilla. Because that kind of couple working together, just so cool. Well, anyways, I get up to this whole shtick, right? And I get up there and I'm saying, now Ananias and Sapphira, they're like a present-day Ananias. I'm doing this whole thing with Doug and Rebecca standing there's Ananias and Sapphira, not realizing that, as usual, I'm putting my foot in my mouth. I actually meant Priscilla and Aquila. I was just testing his modesty and humility and all that. And he passed well, but. So here we have Barnabas who's doing the opposite of what just happens. Maybe Ananias and Sapphira saw this. They said, hey, we kind of want to be like that too. They kind of missed the take on that because instead of giving all the money, they just gave part. That's not really the point of what we're at today. But here we see Barnabas as a son of encouragement. And we don't hear too much of him. What happens after chapter 4? Well, we know the scripture, we know the story in Acts. The church is developing, it's growing. It's expanding, and we see what the apostles begin developing a nucleus and then expanding out from Jerusalem. But they kind of got comfortable in Jerusalem. This is kind of the center of the universe. It's kind of like when we were in Bible school. Everybody, nobody wanted to go, I want to go up and be a pastor in Fort St. John. Like people are going, oh yeah, I want to go to Beggarville. That's where I want to be. Or wherever. They want to be in Vancouver. I want to be kind of in the center because then I can, get a name for myself and kind of make my mark. So I don't know if that was the case, but these early disciples, they kind of hunkered down in Jerusalem. Things were going relatively well. But then what happens? Well, persecution happens, right? Remember by chapter 8, the believers are scattered, and they're scattered throughout. And so they're saying, hey, things are getting hot here, so they leave. And this has happened throughout church history. We looked when we did our church history segment, whenever we did that. We saw that persecution was something the Lord uses. We get too comfortable. I'm not sure what that says about our particular context. But I think even within our context, if we're really serious about the claims of Christ, we're probably not going to be as comfortable as we may be even in our culture. I don't think we have to, I was talking to a friend, one of our coaches from Moscow, and the joke there was a few years ago, and not really a joke, but we had a lot of missionaries that would come, and then they would do kind of stupid, boneheaded things that goes against the local regulations or something, and so then they would get persecution. Basically, they got fined or something. And so then on the newsletters, It was, oh, we're being persecuted in Russia for our faith. No, you're just being stupid, right? I mean, you're not really, you're just kind of doing stuff that you probably shouldn't be doing. So there's that line there. We just don't go looking for persecution, or so that we make good newsletter material. But there is that place where maybe we don't move ahead. In Russia now, it has come to that point where, particularly Alexei in Moscow, they're having challenges where the regulators are coming in and just over-regulating things and basically trying to shut them down, but not by saying we're persecuting the church, just by saying, oh, your kitchen isn't quite this right, or just different stuff they do, right? So it comes in different forms. But in Jerusalem, the persecution was really quite, in your face sort of persecution. People were getting killed. And, I guess as I look at church history too, the church has always done well when it's been on the margins. And yet, for the last 2,000 years, it's almost like, up to about 300 before Constantine made Christianity kind of the central religion, or at least he linked the state and church. The church did really well in the first few hundred years, but it was really tough times. People say, we want to go back to the first century. We want to go back to where the church was. Well, yeah, do you really want to go back to that? I mean, it had to do with lions, and stadiums being flogged today, that sort of stuff. Do you really want to go that hanging upside down until you die? Those sorts of things. No. But it seems like the church has always done well in those difficult situations and in the margins. I'm not so sure why that is necessarily, but it seems to be an axiom that, or the way things go. And then from 300, we had the age of modernity, where, from the church age, you might say, Christendom. And you could make the case that Christianity, once it got linked, it was no longer in the margins, but it became the power, it became at the center, then really the church was not really designed to be the center of power. It wasn't designed to be linked with cultural or society power. It's always done well in the margins. And so I think that's encouraging for us as a Canadian church. Instead of trying to make us like the church should be we should be the ones wielding power in our culture, and that's never really done well. That's never gone well for the church. We haven't grown and become pure and what we're going to talk about, what Barnabas did. We actually then begin thinking that our power is from somewhere else. What does it say in Scripture? It's not by might or what power says, Lord, but what? But by my Spirit. And so it's so easy to, once we get political power, and there's nothing wrong for us living, and that's the line. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. How do we exercise in a representative democracy? Oh man, am I in the weeds already? My first 5 minutes, I'm really off topic. Well, we'll get back. But how do we function in representative democracy with what we should do as a citizen, but at the same time as Christians not be deluded that we're really going to make a change in our culture and society by doing it from the center. The church has always done that from the grassroots and from the margins. And that's the same with developing others. We're going to see what Barnabas did. He didn't do it from the centers of Jerusalem, the centers of power. He did it almost underground, from the shadows. And so his nickname was Barnabas, as we said. He was a son of encouragement. And at this point, he was a nobody. But he was not an Ananias. He had a different attitude. And then we'll see that. And then in Acts 9, we're looking the persecution that led to the scattering of the believers. But then in chapter 9, there's a story of another fellow who we get to know fairly well. But at the time, he was more notorious than famous. And he was part of this persecution that was happening. And you know the story. He was on his way from Jerusalem to Damascus, and he was going there to get Christians so he could bring them back and enslave them and bring them back to Jerusalem and bring them to the high priest. And this man, as you know, was Saul. And as he's going to Damascus, what happens? We know the story. He's bumping along on his horse, whatever they used to do on his horse rides. Maybe he's checking his text or emailing or something. I don't know what he was doing. He probably had no Wi-Fi, so he was probably just reading a text or something. And as he's going along, all of a sudden there's a bright light. And he falls to the ground. And at that point, this is a pivotal moment. You know the story. I won't get into it. We don't have time this morning. But Paul then or Saul, I should say, at this point, he goes blind. The prophet comes, and eventually Saul spends several days with the disciples in Damascus. And he's there for a while. And after many days have gone by, the Jews in the city are saying, oh, what's this guy? I thought he was, what's he doing now? And so then they try to kill him. He sneaks out and he comes to Jerusalem. And of course his idea is, now this is kind of where this whole thing started. This Jesus that I now heard about, there were these followers of what he called the way. And so he's now in Jerusalem, and he says, I'm going to go and look up these disciples and and just become one of them. Of course, you know the story, what happened. He came to the disciples and they were all excited. Oh, now you're part of us, you're a brother with us, this is great. Is that kind of what happened? No, we better get back to the text here. It says, when he came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples in verse 26. And what happened? They were scared of him. Afraid of him. They were afraid. Well, that makes sense. Some of them had family members probably that were killed by this Saul fellow. And so they thought, you're going to come now. Maybe this is his new strategy. A new strategy to kind of infiltrate. And so who knows what they might have thought. One of my favorite verses in the Bible, I know it's yours too, I'm sure, after this morning. This little verse in verse 27. There's two words, but Barnabas. Now think of it. Barnabas, what does he do? Remember, he's a son of encouragement. Now Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. Now Barnabas would have known the apostles. Obviously, he had given them land, he was part of this thing, and so he had a reputation already. Right? He had something to lose. And he told them how Saul on his journey, and he tells them the story. Now remember, he's not telling them the story of the Apostle Paul, the one that started all these churches, the one that wrote much of the New Testament, the Apostle Paul. That's not who he's talking about. He's talking about Saul, the recent convert who used to kill Christians.
Right.
And in that context, that's what's so powerful about Barnabas. About Barnabas. I wonder what I would have done. I've already got a ministry going, got a name, wrote the book. Then you have some young upstart coming along who obviously is pretty talented, good at killing people anyway. That's just a transferable skill, I'm sure. We can iron that out. Would have I opened up doors? See, here we see Barnabas opening up doors for this man Saul. How do you think you would have acted toward this Christian killer? What do you think you would have done? Do you or do we usually see people as they are or as the potential of what they can become? I don't know. That's kind of a rhetorical question. If I'd be honest with you, you probably know how I'm going to answer, if I'm honest. I kind of see people as they are. Especially if I have a lot to lose to link my wagon with theirs. They could take me down. But what happens in a church if we're all like that? We're never willing to take risks. I mean, this is different than probably where we are in terms of with the stand firm in the program. I mean, that's part of the DNA of linking with people and saying, hey, let's forget your past. Imagine Saul's past, not a very glorious past. You couldn't get much worse than what he did. So, how does this reflect, though, our understanding of people? How does this reflect our understanding of how God views people? Maybe how he sees us. Wait, just a few questions there. I want you to take some time and share that around your tables, and then we'll come back.